All right, welcome back to another episode of the Always Adaptive Podcast. This is episode number 14, and today's topic is near and dear to my heart. Most of you know by now, I'm a strength and running coach. I've been coaching people for about over 10 years, and a lot of people that I've worked with are over the age of 40, and I've actually worked with people well up into their 90s. So currently I have people in their 40s and their 50s and their 60s, 70s, 80s, and so building muscle and strength over 40 is a very important topic to me. The idea that muscle and strength gains are just for young people is just flat out wrong. Someone that's 50, 60, 70 years old can make a tremendous amount of progress. I can't tell you how many times I've had someone say to me, well, what's the point? I mean, it's too late. I don't have that much longer anyway, kind of with the sort of idea that they should just bend over and take it up the rear and not worry about it because it's too late. And it's not. You can build strength and muscle well beyond your 60s. Strength is a skill. And as long as your nervous system is functioning, it doesn't matter what age you are. Your body will adapt to that skill, whether you're in your 60s or whether you're in your 20s. It really doesn't matter. I'm going to go over a few studies here today to prove exactly that. And at the end of this, I'm also going to provide you with a basic program that combines strength training, power development, and running for those of you that are interested in sort of the hybrid stuff that's popping up now. And of course, the running could be replaced with something else. It doesn't mean you have to run. You could do elliptical, or there's stationary bike or row machine. There's any number of different cardio tools that you could do, or just walk. I don't care. But the idea there is that I'm providing you with a free program so that if you're kind of older in your 40s, 50s, 60s, and you're not really sure where to start, this program is a good place to start. And we're not just talking about looking better here. We're talking about performance, longevity, and independence. Peter Attia, he's a famous podcaster. He's a doctor. In his book and in his podcast, he started talking about the marginal decade. And so when he works with people, and I've started doing this too, I've kind of stole it from him. Shout out to Peter Attia. Started asking people to envision their marginal decade. And what that essentially is their last 10 years of life. And, there's a difference between health span and lifespan. Lifespan is how long you live. Health span is the quality of life of those years. And so the last 10 years of life, typically you want to have a slow taper of your quality of life. What you really don't want to happen is some sort of fall or some crazy surgery or illness, and your health just drops off a cliff. And so it's useful to get people to envision that. And Peter talks about this, about how most people all want the same thing. They really just want their functionality and independence. That's what I want. That's one of the major reasons why I train as hard as I do, is I just want to be independent when I'm older. And so following a program like I'm going to be giving you, and this program is evidence-based, it's going to follow some of the protocols that are actually in the studies I'm going to talk about, is a really good way of ensuring that your marginal decade is the best marginal decade that it potentially could be. Obviously, you would have to think outside of the box in terms of nutrition and sleep and all that other stuff. But for this, we're just going to be talking about strength, hypertrophy, and power. And I keep bringing up power because weightlifting isn't just about strength. Strength is great, and strength is how much weight you can move, but power is how quickly you can move it. And as I've said over and over in other videos, one of the biggest things that we lose are fast twitch muscle fibers as we age. And with that, we lose our ability to move quickly. So people start falling and stuff. So training powerfully is vitally important to ensuring that you don't fall. But I think the gap between younger and older lifters isn't as big as some people think, and your potential isn't capped by your age. It's capped by your willingness to do the work. Now, that's not to say that as we get older, it does get a little bit harder. Yes, it does get a little bit harder, but as you're going to see with some of these numbers, it's not that much harder, and you can still make an amazing amount of progress. Really, the big thing that people need to look out for is detraining. And that's one of the things that one of these studies looked at, was what happens, how quickly do people lose strength and muscle when they stop training? And for that, there's definitely a bigger gap between younger people and older people in terms of how quickly they lose their stuff after they've stopped training. But the key concept for most of this stuff is going to be progressive overload. So you've probably heard that phrase before. And every study we'll cover today goes through some form of progressive overload. And in that program that I told you about that I'm going to provide for free, it does show some form of periodization, which is like a certain number of weeks doing a certain intensity and then a certain number of weeks doing a different intensity. You call them blocks. So you're periodizing your program to make sure that you're either increasing the weight or decreasing the reps or whatever, because your muscles don't really care what age you are. They just care about the stimulus. As long as you're providing a stimulus and you're actually training and you have a methodology to your approach where you're systematically increasing something, you'll make progress. I mean, I think the biggest thing is when people stop training. I can't remember who said it, but I heard something a while ago. There's a difference between people that train and exercise. People that exercise, they're just going to the gym. They're just trying to work up a sweat. They don't really have, like, they're not writing down their weights or reps or anything. And those people, they kind of look the same every time you see them. You don't really ever see them make progress. But people that train are following a system. They're increasing some form, some variable at some time. And you will see those people make a lot of progress. They'll start to look different. You'll see them start crushing some lifts, actually moving some heavy weight. And it's great to see it. And that's why I try to, around every corner, encourage as many people as possible to train and not just exercise. This episode isn't just for people that are over 40. It's for anyone that wants to be strong and capable for life. If you're in your 20s, this is your blueprint for staying strong for the rest of your life. If you're in your 40s, 50s, 60s, or 70s, this is your blueprint for getting back to how you used to be. So anyways, on to the studies. So study number 1, this is from the Journal of Strength and Conditioning Research. Association of age with muscle size and strength before and after short-term resistance training in young adults. So the way that I'm going to go through this, I have 3 studies I want to talk about. I'm going to start off with sort of the younger age range. So this one is 18 to 39-year-olds. And then we're going to do middle age. And then we're going to do comparing young to really late stage adults. But the study objective for this study was they examined the relationship between age, muscle size, and strength in young adults before and after 12 weeks of progressive resistance training. Now, they say young, but there's a broad range. The average range is 18 to 39-year-olds, so almost 40s. There are 826 men and women, and the training protocol they used was a 12-week unilateral resistance training program. Only the non-dominant arm was trained. Periodization was weeks 1 through 4. They do 12 reps, weeks 5 through 8, 8 reps, and weeks 9 through 12, 6 reps. So essentially the idea there is if they can do more than the assigned reps, then they increase the weight. And so that was their way of applying progressive overload. Now, why did they decide to only train the non-dominant arm as opposed to the dominant arm? So typically your dominant arm will be a bit stronger in most things than your non-dominant arm. And so this is their way of ensuring that any sort of increase in strength, they can actually attribute it to the protocols that they were using and not from any sort of day-to-day activity, just from using that arm more than the left arm. Also, since the dominant arm stayed untrained, that serves as their control for the study. So to measure progress in this study, they didn't just rely on subjective improvements. They used some legit science-backed assessments. First, they looked at muscle cross-sectional area, or CSA, using MRI scans. This is one of the best ways to see actual muscle growth because it shows changes in muscle size at a deeper level. Then they tested isometric strength using something called a maximal voluntary contraction, or MVC. Basically, this measures how much force you can generate in a fixed position, no movement, just pure tension. And finally, they tested dynamic strength with just a classic 1-rep max strength test. So the post-training results were the following. Muscle cross-sectional area grew by an 18.9% overall. 1-rep max strength grew by a shocking 54% overall, and their maximal voluntary contraction increased by 20.66. So that's including both groups. It's just talking about both groups. But there were no significant effect of age on muscle hypertrophy for the cross-sectional area, no significant effect of age on isometric strength. There was a small but significant negative correlation between age and 1-rep max strength gains. Essentially, older individuals saw a slightly smaller increase in their 1-rep max strength. So they made strength gains. It just wasn't as much as the younger folks. So the takeaway here is muscle size and strength increased significantly across all age groups. Age had no impact on muscle hypertrophy. Age had no effect on isometric strength improvements, and slightly lower rate of dynamic strength gain in older participants, but the difference was very minimal. Overall, resistance training was highly effective regardless of age. Now we're going to talk about study 2. So this one's entitled Changes in Power with Resistance Training in Older and Younger Men and Women, the Journals of Gerontology. It's from 1999. So they had 32 total participants, 17 older adults aged 56 to 66, and 15 younger adults aged 21 to 30. and they're investigating how progressive resistance training affects muscle power in both older and younger adults. They're going to compare strength and power gains across age and sex groups. So they follow the 12 weeks of progressive resistance training twice per week, 3 sets per exercise, 80% of 1 rep max. 5 exercises performed using Kaiser pneumatic resistance machines, and they had used a strength and power assessment of 1 rep max and muscle power testing tested at 40%, 60%, and 80% of 1 rep max. What they used for that was a knee extension machine and an arm pull machine. If you're not familiar with power, once again, power is how quickly you can move the weight, not how much weight you can move. So here's the results. For arm pull power, all subjects increased arm pull power similarly at 40%, 60% of 1 rep max. No significant power increase at 80% of 1 rep max for any group. Okay, it's pretty good. Leg extensor power. Older and younger adults had similar absolute increases in leg extensor power at 40% and 60% of 1 rep max. At 80% of 1 rep max, all groups had similar improvements. Men increased leg extensor power more than women at 40 and 60% of 1 rep max. For strength gains, older and younger participants increased strength similarly across all exercises except the left knee extension, where younger adults gained more. Men increased strength more than women in all exercises except the double leg press, where there was no significant difference. So the key takeaways here are older adults can gain power and strength at similar rates to younger adults. There were no significant differences in upper body power gains between older and younger adults, and leg power improvements were also similar between age groups at all intensity levels. Heavy resistance did not increase arm power. And that's kind of an interesting topic to talk about. People make the mistake of trying to load, when they're training power, they're trying to load it as heavy as possible. And that's not necessarily what you're trying to do. As your load gets heavier, you will move the weight slower. So that's not the correct training stimulus that you're looking for. You're looking for explosivity. So just because you can deadlift, 400 pounds doesn't mean you should try and clean 400 pounds. Like cleaning 400 pounds to the rack position, it's going to look pretty ugly. It's going to be pretty slow. And chances are you're going to have to use your arms a bit more than using raw hip extension to actually move the weight like you should. Or a kettlebell swing, for example. You see people, when they do heavy kettlebell swings, they will lift the weight up with their arms out in front of them, as opposed to using hip extension to move the weight explosively. Lastly, we have study number 3. Now, this one is entitled Age and Gender Responses to Strength Training and Detraining, Lemmer et al. From the year 2000, Medicine and Science in Sports and Exercise. 41 participants, originally 51, but ages 20 to 30 and ages 65 to 75. The study aimed to examine the effects of age and gender on strength gains and strength retention. So the young group was 18 participants, 10 men and 8 women. Older group was 23 participants, 12 men and 11 women. And again, the age range 20 to 30 years old for the young and 65 to 75 years for the older. So the protocol that they used was unilateral knee extension training, and they only trained one leg, the dominant leg this time, while the untrained leg acted as a control. So very similar to the other study, but this time they reversed it. That eliminates genetic and individual differences. And since both legs belong to the same person, this removes variations in genetics, lifestyle, diet, and daily activities that could affect muscle adaptations. It eliminates anything that they basically can't control for with other people, especially with women in the study. There are, there's a potential there for their cycle to mess with the results of the study. So largely, the untrained leg did not gain strength at the same rate as the trained leg, but older men actually showed some strength increase in the untrained leg, possibly due to neural adaptations, and that's called the cross-education effect. And that's actually pretty interesting that even though one side's not doing anything, it's still getting lit up neurally in the brain and learning in the same way that the working leg is. Really interesting. Andrew Huberman, I can't remember what episode he was talking about this on, but another phenomenon similar to this is how when you're reading, even though you're not actually speaking, you're not there's no audible noise coming out of your mouth, your vocal cords are still being trained as if you are speaking. So as you're reading, your vocal cords are actually getting better at helping you speak the very words that you're reading, which is really interesting. The human body is just so crazy, man. It never ceases to amaze me. It just time and time again, there's so many cool things that the body is capable of. So for this study's results, there were some differences, but nonetheless, the older adults still made a lot of progress. So for strength gains, the young adults had a 34% increase in their strength gains, going from 73 kilograms to 97 kilograms. And the older adults saw a 28% increase in their strength gains, going from 60 kilograms to 76 kilograms. So that's not that far off. It's a 6% difference, but 28%, that is huge. That's a massive increase. There were no significant differences in gains between genders. Age effect on strength. Younger participants saw slightly greater increase, as I just said, in 1 rep max strength compared to older adults. However, both groups saw substantial and meaningful strength gains. Now, detraining, and this is the big elephant in the room. All groups maintained strength for the first 12 weeks. There was no significant drop from post-training levels at this point. However, at 31 weeks, young adults saw an 8% strength loss, whereas older adults saw 14% strength loss. So significantly more strength loss there for the older people. So all these studies, this isn't a deep dive in all this stuff. This is just giving you some examples of how it is not too late for you to start working out and to make some real progress. Yes, there are some roadblocks. Your mobility might not be what it used to be. You might not make as much progress as if you were a 20-year-old, but I already showed a 40-year-old can make really good progress. A 65-year-old can make good progress. So your age doesn't really matter that much, but I'm going to provide a program now, and I'm going to just go through this and talk about some of the protocols. Now, I used my own background writing programs for this, but I also used some of the protocols that were used in the study so that you can be sure that this is an evidence-based program, not just something that I pulled out of my butt. So it's a 6-day program with 1 rest day, and it's a upper body, lower body split with cardio sprinkled in between. So the way that this program works is there will be weight training days and there will be running or cardio days. Again, it doesn't have to be running. It can be whatever you have access to. If you have an elliptical, that's great. But for the weight training days, it will be split up into 2 sections. The first section is called your power development section, and the second section would be your strength and hypertrophy section. So for power development, it is important that you rest long enough during this. So just as an example, for one of the days, you have a barbell push press. Now, I also have dumbbell or kettlebell push press in there as well. You can look up tons of videos online of how to perform a push press, but it's essentially you go down into a squat, and then as you stand up, you press the weight overhead. Now, when you're doing this, it's not about how much weight you're moving. It's about how quickly are you moving it. So you do sets of 5 or so, and you rest for 3 to 5 minutes. This is not cardio. And it's very important that if you start to feel as though on rep number 4, you're slowing down and you're no longer moving the weight as fast as you were on rep number 3, then just stop the set because you're no longer training the right stimulus. It's okay. Like we're not here to just work. We're here to get a really high quality stimulus. And for all of the strength training and hypertrophy stuff, it's sets of 6 to 12. Now I put that range in there because one of the studies, Lowndes et al., the one from 2009, they used a periodization of 12 rep max, 8 rep max, and 6 rep max. So weeks 1 through 4, you're at 12 rep max, meaning if you can do more than 12 reps with a given weight, then you increase the weight and to a place where you can't do the 12 reps. And you keep doing that until weeks 5 through 8, the number becomes 8 rep max. So if you can do a weight for more than 8 reps, then increase the weight. You do that for weeks 5 to 8, and then weeks 9 through 12 is 6 rep max. So if you can do a weight for more than 6 reps, increase the weight. So let's go through each day. I hope you have a pen and pad handy, and I'll also provide a document for you to download in the description. So day 1 is lower body power and strength plus sprint work. Power section is hill sprints. So you're doing 5 rounds of hill sprints, about 40 meters at 100% effort. So 40 meters, that's not that long. It take you maybe, well, depending on how quick you are, you might be really fast. But it'll probably take you about 6, 7, maybe 8 seconds if you have a really steep hill. And again, you're taking 3 to 5 minutes between each of those. You're doing that 5 times. And then after that, you go into your strength section. So back squat, you're doing all 3 rounds of your back squat at once. So you're doing 1 exercise at a time, not circuit style for your strength. So you do back squat, 3 rounds of 6 to 12 reps, depending on, again, what week you're in that periodization cycle. After that, you have Romanian deadlifts, 3 times 6 to 12, same thing. Bulgarian split squats, 3 times 6 to 12. And it's important for the split squats, since that's a unilateral exercise, take time to rest in between sides as well. That's a big mistake that people make, where they won't rest between sides, even though they're resting between exercises. And just because you're not working that leg doesn't mean that your nervous system isn't still tired. So make sure you're getting adequate rest there. And then standing calf raise, 3 rounds of 6 to 12 reps. Day 2 is upper body power and strength. So power development section, just like day one. This one has 2 exercises, and this is circuit style, your power development section. So you have barbell, dumbbell, or kettlebell, push press, whatever you have access to, sets of 5. And like I mentioned, big rests in between each set of 5. You're doing 3 rounds of that. And then medicine ball wall throw. So there's a lot of different medicine ball exercises you can look up. But if you don't have access to a medicine ball, just doing push press is totally fine. You don't have to do a circuit. Keep it simple, keep it effective. I really don't care. But you do that circuit style, push press, med ball, and then big rest. And then do that 3 rounds, resting for 3 to 5 minutes between rounds. After that, the strength section, you have bench press, 3 times 6 to 12, barbell row, 3 times 6 to 12, overhead press, 3 times 6 to 12, and then tricep dips, 3 times 6 to 12. So day 3 is going to be your tempo run. So there are different heart rate zones that you should train in. And, there are those that would say all of your running should be slow and conversation pace. I believe in a mix of all of it. So you have your sprints on one day, you have your tempo run on another day, and then you have your long conversation pace on another day. A tempo run would either be classified as sort of like a race pace, spending time at your race pace, or other people define it as like a lactate threshold run. I'm not going to get into the specifics of that, but essentially the way that you do it, and you can progressively overload this as well, but 5 to 10 minutes of a warm up at zone 1 to 2. So 1 is very easy. Zone 2 would be like your aerobic zone. And a good way of measuring that zone 2 would be 180 minus your age. Keep your heart rate under that, or just call it conversation pace. Can you speak a few words pretty comfortably without being out of breath? That's a good pace to do your warm up at, probably even slower. And then once you're done with your warm up, you do 6 minutes at zone 3 through 4. So somewhere in that zone 3 to 4, there are plenty of equations you can use online. If you have a running watch, a Garmin, or any of the similar watches, they'll actually tell you what your heart rate zones are in the app. But you do 6 minutes at zones 3 to 4, somewhere in between there, and you rest for about 120 seconds. And you do that 3 times. After that, you can do a little bit of mobility. So there are a lot of mobility drills that you can do, like a 90-90 stretch or the world's greatest stretch. There are tons of stretch videos. Just look up one on YouTube that's just a couple minutes long. And that's a good practice to have after you're running. For day 4, we have lower body again. And for the power development section, we're doing heavy kettlebell swings or snatches. Now for kettlebell swings, I have sets of 10, or you can do Olympic cleans or snatches, and that's for sets of 3 to 5. So it's basically, what do you have access to? If you have some heavy kettlebells at home, then do some swings. If you have access to an Olympic weightlifting setup where they have bumper plates and stuff like that, then do the Olympic weightlifting. I think cleans are an amazing power development tool. Probably the kettlebell swings are a close second, but I would say Olympic weightlifting is probably king when it comes to training power. And then training non-counter jumps. So non-counter jumps are when you drop down into your hip hinge or your athletic stance and you pause. So typically when someone jumps, they drop down quick and they rebound back up. There is no pause, and they use that momentum, the reflexive contraction going down into their hip hinge. They utilize that to help them get more vertical. So you're not going to be using that. You're going to drop down into your hip hinge, pause, and then explode out of the hip hinge after a moment or two. And you're doing 3 singles of that. So what that would look like is you do 1 jump, gather your breath, do another jump, gather your breath, do another jump. That is 1 round. You're doing 3 rounds of that. And then after that, you have your strength and hypertrophy section. So again, back to sets of 6 to 12. So you got leg press, hamstring curl, and glute bridges. 3 sets of 6 to 12 for all 3 of those. Day 5, upper body and hypertrophy. So power development section, explosive pull-ups. So if you are strong enough to do loaded pull-ups, then you would do this body weight, because again, we're looking at 40 to 60% of your 1 rep max. So this isn't about the weight. Go to body weight and do these pull-ups as explosively as you possibly can for sets of 3 to 5. And then you can combine that with whatever push press you were doing on the other day. So barbell, dumbbell, or kettlebell push press. And that is also sets of 3 to 5. Again, circuit style. So do your set of pull-ups, do your set of push press, big rest, 3 to 5 minutes, rinse and repeat, 3 rounds. And then moving on to your hypertrophy section, incline dumbbell press, assisted pull-ups, or lat pull-downs, because you did your explosive pull-ups in the first section. So now we're focusing on hypertrophy and controlled eccentrics and all that jazz. So you got assisted pull-ups or lat pull-downs and lateral raises for 3 sets of 6 to 12 for all 3 of those, one exercise at a time. And then finally, we have day 6, which is your long run. Now, you can do whatever you feel you can do, but I put a broad range in here, 45 to 90 minutes. And the heart rate zone that you should think of is, again, that 180 minus your age. So that's a really just rough estimate. There are those that would say, oh, that's not a good, it's a decent rough metric for you to use. Now, you could subtract 5 based off of, do you smoke cigarettes? Subtract another 5 if you're massively overweight. Like there's other things to take into account. But again, 180 minus your age is just a rough estimate. And if you're at 180 minus your age and you feel like you can't talk, then slow down even more. The goal there is conversation pace first and foremost. So 45 to 90 minutes of that. If you are new to it, maybe even start with 30 minutes in the beginning and just each week add 10 minutes or so. But ideally building to over 90 minutes. And day 7 is rest and recovery. Take it easy. Take a walk. I love taking walks. I think walks are great active recovery, and I think more people should do them. So again, that's just a really basic program for you to follow. I'm not claiming this is the best program in the world or anything like that, but it checks enough boxes that it's taking longevity into account, where it'll make you stronger. It'll make you more explosive. You will build muscle, especially if you're following the periodization that I laid out, which will be in the program. And you'll be building up great cardiovascular endurance and power there too. You also start to be able to run faster. So there's a lot of boxes being checked with this. And this is very similar to the sort of program that I actually follow as well. I follow a push, legs, pull, run program where I'm hitting each day 1.5 times a week. But the exercises that I outlined in here are very similar to the style of exercise that I do in my own program. And I know it works. It is very effective. It's been very effective for me. It's been effective for many others. So yeah, I'm excited to get feedback from people. If they decide to try it, please let me know how it's going and give me, updates on it. But anyways, that's enough yapping for me. Once again, this is the Always Adaptive podcast. If you're still here at the end, I hope you found this enjoyable and you learned a lot. And I hope that I gave you hope. If you are a 40-year-old person or a 60-year-old and you have it in the back of your head that it's too late and, what's the point? I promise you it's not too late. You can make a tremendous amount of progress. And you will, if you're smart about it and you're systematic about it, it's unlimited what you can really do. I'm telling you, the human body is amazing and it never stops adapting as long as you, go slow and train smart, and don't get injured first and foremost. But my name is Randall James. I'm a strength and running coach of 10 years of experience. If you're interested in any coaching inquiries, you can email me at randall@alwaysadaptive.com. And I hope you'll follow me on all social media. You can just type in Always Adaptive and I should pop right up. But if you enjoyed this, then leave a like, please, or, subscribe, leave a comment, anything, any sort of review, any of that stuff helps tremendously. I really appreciate it. But I will see you at the next one.